What is psychological safety and why is it important for you and your team? Hi, I'm Claudia Cimenti, your top coach. Join me and Ulrike Demuth today as we discuss psychological safety. Welcome to another episode of Top Team with Ulrike and Claudia. If you like what you're seeing here, please do not forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so that you do not miss any future episodes. Let's get to it. Hello, everybody. Today, Ulrike and I are going to talk about psychological safety. While it's important that members of your team are able to go out on a limb. So welcome to Top Team, YouTube discussions here between Ulrike Demuth and myself. We are team coaches and professional individual coaches. So Ulrike, psychological safety, what is it for you?
Well, for me, it's something I definitely need before I do anything with anybody online, especially online, but also if I do it in presence. For me, it's absolutely essential to have this, well, the feeling I just have with you at the moment. I just can talk like I feel, like I think, and it's out. I can throw it at somebody. And I would like to have this feeling in the room with the coachees, so that they really can discuss what is on their heart. What about you?
Yeah, and I think you bring a good point that it is an integral part of a coaching relationship. If you coach a team, you coach a group, it's very good for that. But also, I think if the team is by itself, between members of the team. So the way that I see psychological safety, it's literally that you're psychologically safe, that you feel it's okay and that you're going to be okay if you ask questions, you point out a mistake, you make a suggestion. And it's this whole thing of leaning into something new, something difficult, because ultimately, isn't that where growth happens? That's where we all want to go, right? It's like, let's push that boundary. So I was actually wondering what I would call the opposite of it. And I was even thinking, like, would I call it psychological insecurity? What do you think we could call it?
This was just jumping into my head. I'm just thinking. So this insecure, being damned to being quiet, not having the confidence to throw out my ideas in the open. Because remember, when you did something new and you talked to whatever, a good friend of yours or whomever you trusted, how different it is if you tell it your neighbor, whom you perhaps, because he always cuts the lawn on Sunday, you can talk to him. And I really think this insecurity does something with my body. I'm not so free. My stomach crunches, my shoulders go up, and myself read. I'm a different. Well, if I have a 360-degree perspective of me, it's just this 1 degree. I really don't feel well with that. It's just very weird. And because of this, I'm so busy with myself, how I am, who I am. Is it good what I say? Is it very bad what I say? How do I judge myself? Instead of having all my energy to my thoughts and share this. And I mean, when we both started, we shared everything is really reasonable, but it doesn't matter because out of that unreasonable stuff comes perhaps something really nice. And if we have a guided talk with how to behave and things like that, I don't think it's that the results are not so realistic, close to reality. I need something real. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely what you said resonates with me, that it does something to you in your body, and it's kind of constriction, I think, and it is a body type representation of also what happens in your head, right? I think that if we feel like we cannot go out on that limb, we cannot push that envelope, we cannot talk for fear of being misunderstood, for fear of being reprimanded, even in some company cultures, right? Those things really put us in a box. And if we as coaches know, if it happens to one, it's very likely that it happens to others as well. And very often it's actually then a thing that might become prevalent and a characteristic of the team, that you have a timid team, that you have a team that cannot go out on that limb and consider these innovative things on the edge, right? So I don't know if I answered your question. Did I answer your question?
Well, to be honest, as we have the psychological safety in this room, this is a constant flow of thoughts. And you kind of answered my question. And at the same time, I was thinking, well, how on earth do we create this psychological safety? Do you remember when we first met, how it was?
Yeah, I mean, there's not.
Why so openly better right now, what we talk and how we talk? So how did we do it?
Yeah, first, before we go into that, I think that this is actually a prime example of psychological safety at work, right? I feel absolutely free to tell you, like, oh, like, am I standing on the hose? Did I answer your question? Did I completely lose my train of thought? Are we on point? Right? Instead of trying to finagle something or stop or run away or whatever, right? That's essentially it. This ability to just go for it. And if it leads you a little bit astray, well, then you know that in the safety of this team, in the safety of this relationship, you will be caught. And people are going to have your back, and you're going to be able to come back to point. Well, I think that if we think back, or let's maybe frame it like that. If I go into a situation where psychological safety would be important, meaning every group or team situation. I mean, I start every workshop like this. Even if it's a 2-hour workshop, I take a few minutes in the beginning and I ask this. And the question that I ask each one to think about it, like what one or two or three things, depending on the length and the depth of the engagement that we envision. What are the most important things that you need from the team, from the group, from everybody, to be able to contribute and feel safe? Right? And you give people a little bit time to reflect on that. It also helps to maybe lead with some examples, or at least put some ideas into the room, whether they're going to be accepted by the group or team later on. That it's just an example. Stuff like confidentiality, like everybody has the right to be heard. There are no dumb questions. I mean, you just put a few things in there that people that have never been exposed to it can get a flavor of the things that we're talking about. And then I would, bring it together and let people just list their things in whatever brainstormy type fashion that it is. Just put them on the board, real or virtual, and then see, like, are there themes here? Are there things? Is there overlap? What is really happening here? And very, very often, I found that there are no big contradictions. And if they are, you bring them up for discussion. What really was it that you meant, and what really was it that you meant? And then see if there's no common ground there. And I think that it's also important to stress, and I would love to get your feedback on this, is to from the get-go say there are no right or wrong answers. And this is the state of that agreement today. It can change next time. We can add to it, we can remove from it, we can adapt and develop any way we want. It's a living, breathing thing.
Yeah, first of all, I think I'm completely with you. I think it's a living document, and it's also the chance to get the hidden elephants in the room, because sometimes people come up with certain very, very strange things. We should be listening to each other, which is quite not normal, but for some people it's well, why do we state the obvious? And it's not obvious that we are listening to each other. And if I sometimes then ask the people, why do you think this is strange to put this on the piece of paper? Why is it so obvious for you? And why did you put it on the paper? Why is it important for you? And then sometimes people say, well, actually, it's not important. Actually, it is quite obvious, but not today because. And then they tell us what happened today to that day to them. And then the whole room knows, this is why this is so important for him or for her today. So we need to have special attention because she has a big ear on listening today. And this might not be the case the next time when we meet. And I remember quite well when we joined this learning group together, this feeling of feeling unsafe. Everyone had the same subject in his hand to learn the same stuff and contribute and so on. But you don't have your role yet, because if you're in a team in a professional way, you found your role normally years ago, and then you play certain stuff. And this is where I think team coaching jumps in so severely, so importantly, because sometimes the role we all play in our lives in different scenarios are not the roles we should be playing, if at all we should play. And I had this strange feeling. I think one of our people in the learning group said, well, it's like a bit, and all this picture out of a sudden came to me, and I just thought, oh, that's the true point. You don't have that very much in your life. So I remember, well, I didn't know how I would feel after this session took place, and also after a while when we had these sessions week by week. And looking back now, how this learning group developed, it's I think the psychological safety which we agreed upon during the first meeting we had was absolutely essential for the success of this group. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, if you allow me, I'm going to share my screen very quickly and actually show the one that we had come up with. Sorry.
You got it. That's good.
This was then condensed. It's the more readable version of the summary of these 3 points that all the various people had put into the room. And here you see that sometimes you might actually wonder, like, yeah, right, is there enough meat on the bone here? But it really was. And it was actually quite clear also within this group how we would live these things. So confidentiality, of course, an open, safe, and challenging space to learn and grow, including time to think and reflect. So it is perfectly okay to just take a moment to gather your thoughts without everybody else starting to already talk over you. Okay.
May I just interrupt a little bit, because it just comes to my head, a challenging space, because you put so much emphasis onto this. It rang a bell. I think that's a point. So not me being nice all the time to you, oh, my little dear blah, regardless of everything is nice. No, this is not the case of psychological safety. It's really the challenge that whatever I say, how crazy it might be, or how really sometimes silly it might be, it's okay to say it. And it could be challenging because sometimes it's not a nice thing which will be discussed, and it should be discussed in the safetiness to discuss things. And this is a difficulty, I think, in a team, especially in a professional team. It's not private, it's not, It's you have to show a little bit from yourself, and I think that's a challenge I saw when we did that sentence.
Yeah.
But sorry, I interrupted you.
No. Let's actually hold on to that point. It might be worthwhile elaborating a little bit. I just want to stop the screen share. So let's go through this. And, trusting that it's okay to go out on a limb, to ask that question, to offer that criticism, and so on, and to change your mind, very, very big one, without fear of any kind of hostility or reprimand, right? And then, things that if you think about it, should be part of every especially team engagement, where you work together in a stable team for a certain time, open communication, non-judgment, and this was something also of importance to Ulrike and I, where English is not our first language, acknowledgement of cultural and language differences. And in today's world that is more and more diverse, with virtual teams spread all over the globe, I think that this inclusion of diversity plays into this very much. Let's talk a little bit when we get off screen share about error friendliness. And then just support. I mean, really, that if something goes awry, that that there's this team to catch you. That's part of it as well. Respect, and then humor and fun, I think, is also quite important. So there's so much, right? And things that come up that you might think, well, isn't that a given? But no, it is not a given. It is not a given that these things happen. There's always some members that are judgmental, that criticize in a hurtful way without it being a constructive way, right? But what you said is exactly right. I think we should not assume that the psychological safety means it's all flowers and birds chirping all the time and sunshine, right? It's there are going to be differences of opinion, but how do you discuss? And are you able to discuss? Those are the things that are much more fundamental, right? I think that when you're there and you push this learning edge, this innovation edge, it's very, very clear that there's going to be uncomfortable moments because, hey, guys, life is uncomfortable and change is very uncomfortable. It's a given. It's part of the process. Okay,
Exactly.
we're not going to be able to run away from it, but then to be in a safe space, that it's okay to feel the effects of change and to start this change. It's very, very interesting.
So it just jumped in my head. There's a saying in customer service areas: if you play well with the customer, everyone is fine, no doubts, no nothing, nobody would call. And it's easy to be nice in a nice environment, but the key issue is really to deal with stuff when things are not going so well. So how do you deal with conflict? How do you deal with disagreement? And this is especially very difficult in teams, because we can be nice to each other all the time. The question is, if there's really a point we have to discuss because our stakeholders want it to change, and to change, as you just said, is very difficult, then I think you need this psychological safety in order to have the courage to perhaps also raise the conflict and just say, well, what is a conflict really? Yeah, and if you have this psychological safety, then let's fight, but it's not a fight with blood. It's just a fight. It's more an exchange of arguments, which could be very heatingly, very hot. But nevertheless, afterwards we can go for a drink. Yes. And if you don't have this safety, then perhaps you wouldn't tell me open in front of all the other people in the room how stupid you think this idea is. Yeah. So if you have the courage to discuss this in the open without thinking, oh, what might the other people say about our relationship, our being as colleagues? And the question is, what do you put in front of you? Is it you, or is it what you do for your stakeholders? So have the safety net. Otherwise, well, you won't be able to deal with each other. To be nice, it's fine. And for 1 hour, I can keep this. But if we work together, we work longer than for 1 hour. Yeah, it needs to be very stable. And I think it needs time. So psychological safety, because you said you do that every day, every time you have this start of the workshop, and so do I. And I'm amazed how often things are slightly changing and how things are growing. So the first statement might be just 1 or 2 points because people really don't know what to say. But after a while, they're used to this process and they learn during the process, next time I will say this because I need it. I found out in this workshop, it didn't go well. And this is why I want to have this in the psychological safety statement next time. So they learn, and out of this learning, this might be growing and might be changing. And this is a basis really. So
maybe originally you start with disagreement and then it just becomes a way of being and a way of interacting without the thought of thing. It becomes part of company culture and or team culture at least, but then hopefully it reflects out into the wider ecosystem of the person, the team, the company, the stakeholders, and then even the world at large, right? So I think that you raised a very interesting point before. It also allows to, again, we're supposed to be adults, but we still confuse sometimes, or some confuse sometimes the situation, the context, the argument with the actual person. And I think it's very important to decouple the two, right? If you have a heated argument, it's because there are arguments that are heated. And it's not like, the guy who is, less than sane, let's say. And
yeah, I mean,
right. I mean, it's just you learn to have these more adult maybe ways of interacting. Actually, Amy Edmondson, who is a professor in the School of Business at Harvard, she talks very much about psychological safety, and I do have her latest book in my shopping cart. And she called it's the Fearless Organization. I think it came out in 2019. And for her, it's all about psychological safety in the workplace. And if you listen to her TED Talks and things like that, you will see that she talks a lot about that particular aspect. And she brought up very interesting points about teaming, because I think that this concept of psychological safety is even more important, or as important, not more, but as important in a teaming situation. Teaming refers to these large groups of people that need to team up on the fly. Right? It might be tomorrow you might work with different people and you in a different capacity and so on. It's this very influx kind of sense of a team. We see it in hospitals. We saw it a lot during Corona, where these makeshift things were thrown together to do a unit of work, a project, a thing, and then it got disbanded again to do the next one with a completely different set of people. And there too, it's very, very important to have this, because it can't all just be thought out in a structure by one person or a group of people, and this is how everything is going to run. It's impossible. First of all, the things are way too complex, but these situations are very often VUCA situations, and there needs to be innovation happening. There needs to be this, what is okay, what is not okay, what are we going to do about it? You need to go out on a limb collectively. So I think that, in whatever form or fashion, this is a very worthwhile exercise. And remember, it doesn't always take hours or days to come up with these rudimentary agreements. It can be at the beginning of a meeting, at the beginning of a working session, that you just sit down and say, like, how are we going to work together psychologically safe here, right now, today?
I was thinking about another point, like, why is it so important to have this psychological safety for the process? And what wouldn't happen if we didn't have psychological safety? And if you work in a professional environment, very often I come across teams which have members with quite a lot of hidden agendas. They say, I know the purpose, everything is fine, we do environmental stuff, for example, blah, blah, blah. And behind the blah is a very strong me. I want to be earning more money. I need a different job. I'm actually bored. I hate my boss. I actually want to have the chair of my boss. So this hidden agenda, everyone has in the back. And I just stated the bad things. There are also people with nice agendas, but these hidden agendas are sitting with me on my very chair. Even in this very moment, I am not only the person you see, but I have everything with me in my little rucksack. And if we have the psychological safety, I can put my rucksack on a different desk and say, well, for the hour we work together right now here, I promise I stick to those rules. Yeah, and perhaps if I learn to stick to those rules, it's good for me, and perhaps I can unpack my rucksack a little bit later, or perhaps I leave it in the cupboard forever because I learned that actually I need something different. And it's actually it's not easy to have this rucksack all the time. It's a very heavy thing, it's weight. And if I'm aware all the time, I need to be the boss in the future, am I really free to have my thoughts, which would be really good for our stakeholders, for the team and everything? Or am I just busy with myself? And how does this fear get process of, well, coaching? Because what is coaching and why do we do team coaching? And this is something I just thought is key for me. I just found out, to prevent people to have their agendas too much in front of them. Otherwise, the process won't go off that nicely. Even if you have an agreement at the end of the workshop, be sure the door opens, everybody gets its rucksack, and it goes the same way as before. So there's no progress, there's nothing, no growth. So the key is, for me, if you don't do it, then the process is lost.
How do you think that having the psychological safety now allows you to take people's selfishness, for lack of a better word, or egocenteredness in that respect? I'm still very much in the background of my thoughts, or in the forefront of my thoughts, rather than the team. How does psychological safety that was agreed upon in this team for this meeting actually change that?
How do you mean that exactly?
Well, you just mentioned that having psychological safety there is conducive to these people, putting themselves a little bit more away, themselves and their agendas a little bit more away. Do you really think that psychological safety helps to do that?
I think it helps because it's the basis for the next step. Because if you then go ahead and say, well, why on earth are we meeting here today? Then the question is, why are people in the room? And we will have a lot of arguments during our journey of the workshop. There's always a lot of, and sometimes it shines that people start talking and talking and talking, and I just can then ask the question, how much is this now belonging to the process? And because I have the psychological safety, I am allowed to ask this question.
Yes.
Otherwise, I would be forced to be so polite and wait until this person is ready and this person gets onto my nerves. And because I have this psychological safety, well, I'm really allowed to say, sorry, I'm not feeling well at this moment because this obviously doesn't belong to the process. How does the group think this is?
Yes.
So it allows me a certain openness. And because I'm openly asking this question, I invite other people to do the same. And step by step, it allows everyone, even those people who are a little bit selfish, to say, well, actually, this obviously is not the right space to be selfish at the moment. I can do that outside this room, but in this room, it doesn't bring us forward. And they can learn with the process, and step by step, they perhaps leave it. So it's a nice, polite way to interrupt someone, but I need to have the permission, and I have the permission by the psychological safety. And I'm just talking about me. Actually, it's not me, it's a whole room who has this the safety to do so. And the question is, if people then don't understand and they didn't get it, that this is the reason why we have the psychological safety, then they have the moment and say, well, actually, this is quite nice. It allows me to be selfish. And at the same time, people will remind me that, well, we are not talking about me, but we are talking about a process at the moment. And nobody blames me, nobody laughs at me, no, nothing. If I'm allowed to say something very stupidly, which is out of the process, very, very nicely, people get me back into the room. And this is a way of working conditions. So, and then you have this humor thing also in the room, say, well, are you thinking about your own chair right now? For example, if you do a reorg or something like that, and by doing a laugh about it, it's a bit easier, yeah. And this is why the longer the process is, the more important it becomes to say, actually, we have still this still there. And sometimes I go back into the process, say, well, actually, we have this thing we agreed in the morning. Is this still valid? Is it enough, or do we need some more sentences on here? Because the tension sometimes is so, you can really feel it, you can touch it. And this means that obviously it's not enough safetiness yet on the paper and not in the head. And then we don't talk about processes, we talk about how do we feel at this moment, and do we need to have another agreement of how we work together? So no, I was taken away. So what do you make out of that?
No, I mean, it's thank you for clarifying that, because it's really that important to expand on it, because it's an agreement. It's something we agree on, and even the most strongly usually self-centered person or whatever, they can all kind of agree to at least marginally go with that agreed upon flow. And the beauty of it is that if there's a small chance given, chances are very good that it is something that works. Because yeah, exactly. What was the question? What do you need in order to be able to contribute and feel safe? So this agreement is what allows people to contribute and be safe. So contribution is going to be very high. right? And the mood is going to be high, creativity is going to be high, and so on. So even the people that maybe in a very standoffish manner, maybe on an intellectual only level originally were saying, okay, well, let's just do that. It's this HR crap or this coachy thing, right? Let's just do it, right? But it's true, right? Let's just do it. They're gonna see that in practice it works.
This is also the reason why I never explain it. I just do it. I just go ahead, because a colleague of mine I could observe, she explained it already, and I could see the faces. Oh gosh, psychological, blah blah blah. So
yeah, I don't give it a name until later, right? I mean,
no, this is just between us.
I always just give it, like let's figure out a good way to work together today.
Exactly.
Right? So it's that important. And so what the big word also that you said is learning. So people are going to learn to interact in such an environment, and they're going to then see the benefits of it, and it's going to become that much more natural to do the next one. And as coaches, it's beautiful because we are not going to be there one day, and who knows, they might just continue with this agreement, more or less explicit. Maybe I hope it's going to be explicit, because if it's captured, it has more meat on the bone, and it can be referred to in moments of heated debate. So it's really, really, really important and really nice. Because I mean, what's the alternative if you really have no psychological safety, right? The bullies in the room are going to dominate the room. Nothing's going to get done. People are going to hog information. There's going to be less sharing happening. What else would happen, Ulrike?
Quite a lot, and I don't want to strengthen that, because I think also bullies in the room are bullies with a human heart. And I came across quite a lot of bullies, and I always found that also a bully is quite happy if people listen to him and acknowledge him or her. And I think they also learned they have to dislearn how they behave, because when they started as a human being, very small, very little, nobody really starts as a bully. There's always a reason behind. And if they find a room where they can a little bit behave like they used to behave, where they didn't have the feeling, oh, I need to bully around, because nobody bullies around because he thinks this is a good way. It just develops. And I think this also helps them in a safe environment, which is weird anyway, somehow HR stuff, just to test like everybody else is testing, and it doesn't against them. They don't lose control or something like that, because those rules they agreed upon, they allow freedom of speech, freedom of thoughts, freedom of everything. And it's a learning process, like you just said, because most people, if there is a conflict and you deal with the conflict with the psychological safety rules, then out of a sudden the hot air of the conflict is gone, because then you see actually there is no real conflict. It's not escalation ladder 12 or 10 or 5, it's possibly just 1 or 2 or 3. And that makes their life easier, because they learn actually ask those questions. They are not used to it, because whenever they have a problem, they just jump into the problem. And the rules, they involve them, but also allow different solutions, even if it seems to be against their hierarchical plans. And they perhaps also learn, if they do it differently, they might still have their goal, the hierarchical ladder, in front of them, but much easier, not with bully, but with listening to people. It's much easier. And they learn to...
Yeah, it's not better, it's different. right? It's one more option. And then and you know, again, the thing here, what I really also would like to stress is this learning that we're talking about. Sometimes it can happen relatively quickly, but other times it's a process to get there, right? We talked about this adaptation, this learning over time. Psychological safety, also like Amy Edmondson said, it's part of the organization. It can become part of a team culture at the very least. So yes, we have talked here a couple examples of, we start a workshop or we start a I don't know, team engagement for that day, and we're going to start with it. But it can be something that is part of the everyday of this team, and it's kind of coloring their whole interaction. And even if it gets off to a rocky start at the beginning, especially if it's a brand new team that goes through, you know, the storming phase and all that kind of stuff, it is something that might not work out right from the get-go, but you know, also if the team has the chance of working with coaches, that can bring a whole other dimension to it, right? Than if they're left to their own devices. Yeah, it's something that also the team has to learn. The team has to learn. Yeah.
I sometimes, if I started with this, what do you need in order to be able to contribute today? Sometimes there's nothing. Well, people are not invited, don't feel invited by the sentences. And sometimes I just say, well, okay, next question, what should happen today? And then they have perhaps a few ideas. And the next third question would then be, what shouldn't be happening today? Because then I invite them to say, okay, this is actually why we are sitting here, blah, 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 blah. And what would be the worst case scenario? And if we go through that, then I jump back to question first and say, to the first question and say, well, actually, now, what do you need in order to contribute? Because all this negativism which is still in the room, it's there on the pinboard. What could you do in order to avoid this? And this would be what you need in order to contribute. And then the ideas, it opens up. I think it's a miracle. If you ask for negative stuff, people have ideas. If you ask, what do you need? They're not used to it. Yes. So I do sometimes, if I have difficulties, this a little bit around the circle thing. Again, with a lot of humor. So because sometimes this could be difficult, you know, there are a lot of hidden elephants in the room. It might be an explosion all of a sudden, But always depends on the team. It's just a thought.
Yeah. No, but there always are. I actually tend to have this thing on the wall or, you know, ready on the screen share if it's virtual. And if some kind of stop happens, right? That people all of a sudden cannot communicate effectively. That the emotional charges get too heated, or that certain people just do not contribute anymore. That there's a stop there as well, right? That this flow is interrupted. I come back to it at any moment during the coaching engagement or the workshop, and I say, okay, what's happening here? Where is this disconnect happening? And what do we need to put on that list as well in order to move forward? What were we missing before? What do we need right now? And so it's again this living, breathing thing. That is just like, how do we work together? How do we catch each other? How do we allow each other to go onto that innovative and learning edge? And so it, again, like so many things in coaching, it's something that happens in the moment. It's very dependent on situation and context. And play with it, let it be. And even there's no right or wrong way of approaching it if you feel psychologically safe.
Exactly. And it starts always something, and it goes through till the very end. So it's always in the room, and it's the basis of collaboration in any circumstances you think where two or more human beings are interacting with each other.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that's a good place to wrap it up? You summed it
I
up.
believe so.
Yes, yes. So,
Thanks for the exchange.
absolutely. Psychological safety, it's a biggie. It's one of the basics of a good, fruitful work together. And if you have any questions regarding this, it's most likely a topic we're going to touch on again. There's going to be a link down in the descriptions where you can go and actually ask a question, and we will pick it up sometime in the future. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. And until next time. Thank you, Ulrike. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Claudia. See you then.